In this episode, we are looking at a category of security tooling that often fascinates beginners because it seems to sit closer to the action than ordinary dashboards and scan reports. Multipurpose tools for advanced analysts are useful because they do not serve only one narrow function. Instead, they help defenders discover, test, validate, organize, and interpret different kinds of security evidence as they move from an early question to a more confident conclusion. The examples in the title, Nmap, Metasploit Framework, MSF, and Recon-ng are especially helpful because each one shows a different side of what flexible analysis tools can do when used responsibly and with authorization. For a brand new learner, the goal is not to memorize features or imagine dramatic technical scenes. The goal is to understand why experienced analysts value tools that can answer several related questions, how those tools fit into real defensive work, and why strong judgment matters even more than the tool itself. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A multipurpose tool is valuable because real security problems do not arrive in neat boxes. One day, an analyst may need to understand what is exposed on a segment of the network. The next day, the question may be whether a reported weakness is truly exploitable. And the day after that, the issue may involve mapping an external footprint that the organization did not realize it had. Single-purpose tools still matter, and in many cases they are the best choice for a focused job, but advanced analysts often need something more flexible because real investigations shift direction as new evidence appears. A useful tool in that setting is one that supports movement from discovery to context or from suspicion to validation, without forcing the analyst to start from zero every time the question changes slightly. That is why these tools matter so much. They are not special because they look impressive. They are special because they help analysts adapt when security work becomes messy, incomplete, and full of uncertainty. The phrase advanced analyst can be misleading if you hear it as a label for someone who simply knows more commands or uses more complicated software than everyone else. In good security practice, advanced usually means something more thoughtful. It means being able to move from a vague concern to a structured investigation, to test assumptions carefully, to compare different forms of evidence, and to explain what the evidence actually means for the organization. Multipurpose tools support that kind of work because they help analysts gather several layers of visibility instead of staring at one report and hoping it tells the whole story. A beginner should care about this even if they are far from using these platforms directly in a mature environment, because the real lesson is not about tool prestige. It is about analyst mindset. The tools matter because they help reveal different dimensions of exposure, behavior, and context, but the analyst still has to decide which dimension matters most and how the pieces fit together. Nmap is a strong example of a multipurpose tool because it helps answer some of the most basic but important questions in security. What systems are present? What services appear to be reachable? And how much of the environment is visible from a particular location are all questions that matter before vulnerability analysis can even become meaningful. If a team does not know what is there or what is exposed, it is already working from an incomplete picture. Nmap helps reduce that uncertainty by gathering information about hosts, services, and network-facing behavior, and that makes it useful for discovery, inventory support, exposure awareness, and architecture review. For a beginner, the easiest way to think about it is that Nmap helps defenders look at the network from a perspective grounded in reachability rather than in paperwork. A diagram may say one thing, but a discovery-oriented tool can show what is actually responding, which is often the more important truth. What makes Nmap especially valuable is that the information it gathers supports many different defensive questions rather than only one narrow technical task. An analyst may use it to confirm that a newly deployed service is exposed only where expected, to see whether a forgotten device is still reachable, to understand whether segmentation appears to be working, or to examine how much of the internal environment is visible from a compromised or simulated vantage point. That flexibility is important because the same visibility data can serve vulnerability management, incident response, asset discovery, and general security architecture understanding. At the same time, Nmap does not produce automatic wisdom. A quiet system may still exist behind controls the tool cannot cross, and a visible service may be intentional rather than a mistake. Good analysts therefore treat the output as evidence that requires context. The tool helps them see more clearly, but the real value comes from asking why something is visible, whether it should be visible, and what that visibility means for risk. MSF represents a different side of advanced analysis because it is associated with controlled validation rather than simple discovery. Many beginners first hear about it in a way that makes it sound dramatic, almost as if using it is the same thing as being an expert. That is the wrong lesson. In responsible defensive work, a framework like MSF is valuable because it helps analysts examine whether a reported weakness behaves the way a scanner or report suggests it might behave, especially in a lab, test, or other authorized setting where validation is appropriate. That matters because vulnerability findings often begin as probable conditions rather than proven realities. A scanner may indicate that a weakness appears present, but the organization still needs to know whether the weakness is practical, reachable, and meaningful in the environment it actually cares about. MSF helps support that deeper understanding when used with care, clear permission, and a defensive purpose. One of the most important ideas connected to MSF is the difference between theoretical risk and demonstrated risk. A report may suggest that a vulnerability is serious because a certain software version, service, or weakness pattern is present, but that does not automatically prove that exploitation is feasible under the real conditions surrounding the target. Controls may block the path, configuration may reduce the danger, or the scanner may simply be mistaken. A validation-focused tool helps analysts close that gap between possibility and evidence. Used properly, it can support clearer conversations about urgency, prioritization, and compensating controls because the organization is no longer relying only on an abstract description of what might happen. It is looking at what the system actually allows under controlled conditions. That does not mean every finding should be tested aggressively, and it certainly does not mean the tool should be used casually. It means disciplined validation can sometimes turn uncertainty into clarity, and that is a major advantage for defenders. Recon-ng shows yet another side of multipurpose analysis because its strength sits more in reconnaissance and organization than in direct validation. Security teams often focus heavily on internal systems and forget how much the outside world may already reveal about the organization through public information, exposed relationships, visible technology choices, domain data, naming patterns, or overlooked internet-facing assets. Recon-ng helps analysts gather and organize that external picture in a structured way, which can be useful for understanding attack surface, digital footprint, and exposure beyond the boundaries of a single scan. The first time we refer to open-source intelligence, OSINT, it is worth emphasizing that this does not mean gossip or vague internet searching. It means using publicly available information carefully and systematically to understand what an outsider could learn without ever touching the organization's internal network. For defenders, that kind of awareness can be extremely valuable because attackers often begin with exactly that kind of external context. From a defensive perspective, Recon-ng helps analysts see how separate bits of public information can form a larger pattern. A single domain record, a naming convention, an exposed repository reference, or a small clue about infrastructure may seem unimportant by itself, but when those clues are collected and related to one another, they may reveal more about the organization's external footprint than leadership realizes. That matters because exposure is not limited to open ports and vulnerable servers. It also includes the information environment around the organization, which can help attackers identify targets, infer technologies, or choose more convincing social engineering approaches. A multipurpose reconnaissance tool helps defenders think about that broader surface in an organized way rather than relying on occasional manual searching and fragmented notes. For beginners, this is a useful reminder that cybersecurity is not only about the systems people intentionally expose. It is also about the information trails, patterns, and connections that unintentionally help outsiders understand the environment. When you place Nmap, MSF, and Recon-ng beside each other, the reason they belong in the same conversation becomes much clearer. Nmap helps with technical visibility into reachable systems and services. MSF supports controlled validation of whether certain reported weaknesses deserve more serious concern. Recon-ng expands the picture outward by helping the analyst understand publicly available context and digital footprint. Each tool is multipurpose in its own way, and together they demonstrate an important truth about advanced analysis. Good defenders rarely solve a problem by looking from only one direction. They combine exposure awareness, validation, and contextual understanding so they can answer not just whether something looks weak, but how visible it is, how likely it is to matter, and what additional information might shape the response. That combination is what makes these tools useful in real analyst work. They help connect different parts of the investigation instead of trapping the analyst inside one narrow technical viewpoint. It is also important to understand that multipurpose tools do not replace specialized tools. A dedicated web application scanner may be better suited to finding common web weakness patterns across a large application. A dedicated vulnerability management platform may be far better for recurring enterprise-wide assessment, remediation tracking, and reporting across thousands of assets. A specialized digital forensics platform may provide much deeper artifact visibility than a general-purpose network tool ever could. The reason advanced analysts still value flexible tools is that security problems often begin with an unclear question, not a perfectly defined job description. A strange exposure, an unexpected report, or a suspicious external clue may need to be explored before the team even knows which specialized platform should take over. Multipurpose tools help bridge that uncertainty. They are especially valuable in the space between discovery and conclusion, where the analyst is still gathering enough evidence to understand what kind of problem is actually in front of them. Because these tools can resemble things attackers also use, authorization and discipline are not side issues here. They are central to responsible use. The same technical capability can look very different depending on why it is being used, what scope has been approved, how carefully it is controlled, and whether the analyst is respecting operational and legal boundaries. A scan that is authorized and coordinated is part of defense. The same activity without permission is not. A validation effort in an approved lab is different from touching production systems carelessly. Public information gathering for attack surface reduction is different from irresponsible exploration driven by curiosity alone. Beginners need to learn this early because cybersecurity sometimes glorifies capability while speaking too little about judgment. In real professional environments, the line between responsible analysis and reckless behavior is shaped by authorization, scope, documentation, and the discipline to stop when the work moves outside what was approved. There are also several misconceptions that can confuse new learners when they first hear about tools like these. One is the belief that advanced analysts are defined mainly by the number of tool names they can recite or how quickly they can use them. Another is the assumption that flexible tools automatically produce better answers than focused ones simply because they can do more things. A third is the fantasy that powerful tooling can compensate for weak reasoning. In reality, multipurpose tools often amplify the quality of the analyst's thinking, which means they help good reasoning become more effective and bad reasoning become noisier. If the analyst begins with poor assumptions, ignores business context, or jumps to conclusions too quickly, the tool can generate a lot of activity without generating much truth. That is why mature teams emphasize process, validation, documentation, and communication rather than treating the tool itself as the main source of expertise. A more realistic way to picture these tools is as parts of a broader analytical workflow. An analyst may begin by trying to understand whether an unexpected service or host is visible from a certain point in the environment. That visibility question may lead to a deeper concern about whether a reported weakness is truly actionable, which may then require controlled validation under approved conditions. At the same time, the analyst may realize that the organization's external footprint provides clues about related assets or naming patterns that were not considered during internal review. In that kind of situation, the flexible use of Nmap, MSF, and Recon-ng is not about showing off. It is about moving from initial uncertainty to a more complete picture using several forms of evidence that support each other. Once the picture becomes clearer, the analyst can explain the issue to system owners, recommend next steps, and connect the findings to business risk instead of leaving them as isolated technical observations. The biggest lesson for a beginner is that multipurpose tools are most useful when they serve questions, not ego. Nmap matters because visibility matters. MSF matters because validation matters. Recon-ng matters because context and external awareness matter. None of them replaces vulnerability scanners, asset inventories, risk judgment, or communication with the people who actually own and operate the systems in question. What they do provide is flexibility, and flexibility is valuable when the analyst is working through ambiguity rather than following a perfectly scripted path. Once you understand that, the title stops sounding like a list of impressive names and starts sounding like a lesson about analyst maturity. Advanced analysts use flexible tools well because they are trying to answer the right questions carefully, not because they are chasing technical drama. That mindset is what turns powerful tooling into responsible defensive capability, and it is the most important thing to carry forward from this discussion.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.